sounds, and we call upon our knowledge of rhythmic variety, tempos, different feels. I could have gone into a waltz, you know, because play 5. Playing 7. That. You may have heard different feels. I messed around with the bossa nova, some different Afro-Cuban kind of mambo type of thing. But mostly I was just utilizing the sounds around me to create a musical percussion journey that hopefully came across that way. So why don't I just start with talking about what's, you know, this instrument is, the drum set as we know it is, it's an American thing. You know, we presented this to the rest of the world. And some of the, you know, musics of the world have adapted this instrument, but really the birthplace of this instrument is here. New Orleans, you know, Kansas City, you know, there are various, you know, histories of the drum set that you can reference. But for example, it wasn't always this. They had to find ways, you know, in the early days of New Orleans, there was someone playing the snare drum, someone playing the bass drum, someone playing cymbals. So there was 3 different people. So to create this job of one person to play what normally was done by 3 people, you had someone doing this, you had someone doing this, you had someone going. The first version of this was actually down here. That's why you might hear it referred to as the sock cymbal every now and then, because it was down by the sock, the top of the sock, and there was a contraption, sort of like as a pedal, to play it down here. So there was no playing on it up here, it was down there. So everything happened down by the sock. And then someone got the bright idea to come up with a patent on a pole that raises the cymbals up here, so hence you have the hi-hat, and a lot of the swing era dance bands, the sound. So Chick Webb, Gene Krupa, Cozy Cole, you know, Buddy Rich, the hi-hat, Joe Jones in particular, with the Basie band. This was where the time was kept. It wasn't, they weren't keeping time on ride cymbals in those days. So it evolved from this to this. What I just did occurred over a number of years. It wasn't just like, oh, now we have it. So, and early drummers like Baby Dodds with Louis Armstrong and Judy Singleton also played with Louis Armstrong. They would have all kinds of cowbells and wood blocks as part of their, you know, so you'd hear stuff. I don't have any of those things here, but. You hear that kind of sound. And some of those things were also brought over from traps, as we know. We hear in the early theater and vaudeville and theater stuff, drummers were making sounds to accompany performers on stage, whether it be some plays or some small kind of presentation of some sort where they needed sound accompaniment. So maybe they would have all kinds of noisemakers, you know, slide whistles and siren whistles and stuff to sheets of metal to make it sound like it was thunder and all that kind of stuff. So that theater experience was kind of carried over into the early days of jazz, drummers having all of that, those traps and that kind of stuff. And you can hear, there's audio of interviews with Joe Jones talking about who he listened to and those drummers who did all that kind of stuff. But in the modern jazz playing, you know, there's one of the reasons I made reference to a more modern kind of groove that you might hear today, which was that kind of thing, is because it's important to be able to hear and articulate so many different rhythms and grooves now than it used to be in the maybe in the golden era of jazz. If you could swing, you were good. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, if you can't play a lot of different other rhythms, bossa novas or sambas or any number of Caribbean rhythms and all kinds of other stuff, you really need to have a handle on some of that stuff. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I know I've been saying a lot, playing a lot, but hopefully, and I will talk some more. I have a lot more to say, but if you have anything you want to ask now about anything I did, or just maybe something that sprung to your mind as you were listening, I'd rather talk to, have an interaction now, if that's possible. Any questions or comments or anything?
How do you choose symbols to?
How do I choose symbols?
Yeah.
I like symbols that are not too washy, mm-hmm. so that you can hear the attack of the bead of the stick on the cymbal. So you hear that there's a kind of a clarity of the attack. Mm-hmm. And you get the same on that, but I'll just clearly. This is flat ride. I don't know if most of you are familiar with cymbals with no bell, mm-hmm. the flat top, flat ride we call it. And there's much more stick articulation on a cymbal like this than there is on a regular bell cymbal. And that's why people like them, because then you don't have to worry about, is the stick sound getting lost in the washiness of the overtones of the mm-hmm. cymbal. So you can hear the difference. And these are good for playing fast tempos because you can hear the articulation really clear. Mm-hmm. I do the same thing on here. You can still hear it, but it's not as clean as that. Mm-hmm. And also I have rivets in this cymbal that cause it kind of a rattling mm-hmm. sound. That's kind of an Africanism. In traditional African music, there's all kinds of things that have things that shake, mm-hmm. that buzz and rattle and that kind of thing.
Did you drill those yourself, or?
I didn't drill them. I had it drilled. I'm not as good at doing this. And this, you see, there's a lot of holes in this one.
Yeah.
This one, this cymbal has been on every record I've ever played on. It was given to me by. I hadn't even moved to New York yet. I was still in Phoenix, and I went to the studio to play on a commercial, like a jingle for, I don't even know what the product was, but it was some commercial that was going to be on the radio or TV or something. And this cymbal was sitting in the corner of the studio, just sitting there. And I had mine, but I said, let me try it. I put it on, and I liked it. And the studio owner, who was a drummer who had kind of semi-retired and was running the studio, he said, you like that cymbal? And I said, yeah. He said, take it with you. So that moment made it possible for me to have this cymbal on every record I've ever made, mm-hmm. with every Oscar Peterson and whomever, any of those people, this cymbal's on there, all those records. I took the rivets out of this one because I had the rivets in these two, mm-hmm. and sometimes I like to sustain. I like a sustained sound with a riveted cymbal because it gets a certain shimmer. Now I have to get more rivets put in. Usually there's two. You can see there's only one on this side. Usually there's three on each side. Mm-hmm. So why don't you take this off and demonstrate on this one. I played with a gentleman who actually has roots in Albuquerque. Oh. His name is Mr. John Lewis.
Oh,
you guys know that name?
Yeah.
He was a member of Dizzy Gillespie's band in the 40s. I think he may even still have relatives here now, but I heard someone mention that. John Lewis was the pianist and composer and musical director of a group called the Modern Jazz Quartet, the MJQ. And the recording I made with him, you might be interested in it. It was his very last recording. It's called Evolution 2. I don't know if it's Roman numeral 2 or digit 2, but it's Evolution 2. And when he called me for that, he said, Lewis, I'd like for you to make this recording with me. I have some music that I really need to get out there. I have a limited amount of time. My doctors have informed me that I have cancer that has metastasized to my liver, and I don't know how much time I have. And just to hear that on a phone call was a bit jarring, but I was happy that he felt like he wanted me to play on this recording of this very important music. And even when the MJQ's drummer for many, many years, Conrad K was his name, but affectionately known as Connie. When he passed away, Percy Heath, the bassist, and John Lewis both said to me, young man, you were on our short list. So even though I didn't even get to audition, it ended up being a great drummer named Albert Heath, who was Percy Heath's brother, Tootie Heath. He also lived in Santa Fe, I think, until his passing. And another drummer named Mickey Roker also did some of the last of the MJQ gigs before they disbanded. But I'm gonna turn my sound off here. But just knowing that I was, the work I'd done and all of my practicing and had gotten me to the point of being considered for such a job as that position as that inspired me. And then anyway, I made this record with him. But when we made the recording, he was in a wheelchair, and they would wheel him to the piano. We rehearse and he'd play a tape, and they had a bed in there, a cot where he could lie down. Wheel him to the bed, pick him up, put him in bed, he'd lie down, he'd rest, get him in the wheelchair, wheel him back to the piano. This went on for 2 days, and at church we recorded. So, I feel so connected to what came before, and that's why I'm not in a hurry to necessarily, or it's not my goal to immerse myself in what young people are doing now to try to stay current or whatever. I just express music on the drums the way I hear it, and that's what it is. I don't need to be in a hip hop band or whatever the case may be to feel relevant. I feel like being able to express music in all of its power and subtlety on an instrument like this and make people follow your story, the story that I'm telling here. That, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of great musicians learning how to do that. And so I feel like there's only a limited amount of space for the kind of touch that's required to do what I do here in those other genres, because they're a lot louder, generally speaking, and context is different, and there's not a lot of room for the kind of stuff that I did when I first started playing here tonight in that world. And I like being able to hear the drums like this and not have to, have a click track going in my ear and monitors blasting sound. I prefer this. So it's not that I don't, and occasionally I like to dance, and I like listening to dance music and popular music myself. But when I'm performing and playing myself, this is kind of where I feel most comfortable and most able to express. So, but anyway, you asked about cymbals, and so that, and even with hi-hat cymbals, I like a certain sound that it's hard to explain what that sound is, but you just know it when you hear it. But crispness, and I like 14-inch hi-hats. I generally like 20-inch ride cymbals, and you know, because they can come in 22 or 18,
Yeah.
whatever. It's really your personal preference. Crash cymbals, there are various types now. You know, these are popular now. They're called effect cymbals. I used to endorse Sabian cymbals, and they had one called the ozone crash, and they had big holes like this in it, and it had that, you know, the same kind of sound. And when I moved to Zildjian to endorse, I said, well, I don't want to lose this sound, and you guys don't have anything that has a sound. At that time they did, now they do. So the guy found one of these K dark crashes and put these holes in there for me, and this became my, you know, now they do it, but at that time it wasn't done. I wanted that sound, so I still have this one. So cymbals are personal. Generally, drummers who travel around the world mainly only carry their cymbals because drums are able to be provided in various venues and places around where you perform. It used to be that we would travel with drum, but it's very expensive, and now most places have house drum sets. It makes it easier. But these are probably the most personal parts of a drummer's equipment. The cymbals, they're very personal. Anyway, hopefully that answers some of your question.
Why did you transition from Sabian to Zildjian?
Sabian wasn't able to create the kind of sound that I really wanted, and so I figured I'd just give it a try with Zildjian. You know, I don't know if you know the story. It's the same family, really.
Yeah.
The Zildjian family, but so once I moved there, and they finally were able to give me what I needed, and so I stayed. I've been with them for a long time now. So, any question you have?
Oh, what do you do to like warm your hands up?
Well, warm-ups?
Yeah.
Usually warm-ups I'll do, if you see me perspiring, I'm usually, I have an issue with it. but I usually do single strokes. At various volume levels. That's probably the easiest. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. It's probably the most basic warm-up you can do with your hands. And then I might do some double strokes. I might do some flat. I might go through a rudimental type of thing. And then I'll do like, I like triplets because triplets are central to the swing feeling, you know. Triplets, like I think I started with some of those. Hear that kind of stuff. I usually will warm up with something like that, and then also I make sure that I stretch my hands because physically we're doing a lot, and our hands are always closed, holding sticks. So I always do stuff that opens them up, and now you can buy things that even, you know, keep your hands open for a little while. Those are really good. And when I do, you know, do things on a bench or a table, stretch your hands open like that because they're always like this, and you have to do the opposite to get some. You know, I'll do this kind of stuff, and actually if you put your arms out like this, and like you have a wall on each side. You can feel the stretch in there just from doing that, and then so I usually do circles forward and circles back like this. And if you do enough, I've gotten up to 100 this way and 100 this way, and you feel like you've been lifting weights after you just do those. And then I shake my hands off like this. So because there's little muscles in there, you know, tendons and ligaments and stuff that, you know, so. And often I'll get hand massages also, which is great. So, and I don't know if you've ever done that, what do they call that wax? Paraffin wax?
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, it really feels good on your hands. And so I just take care of my hands. So, and I think that those physical stretches are an important part of warming up as much as the exercises are. Does that help?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super helpful, yeah.
Anyone else? Any general questions? You can ask about traveling the world, was that right? Any of that stuff. I've been all over Asia, Japan, China, Malaysia, Singapore, Korea, where else? South America, been to Brazil. And when I go to these places, I'm always kind of checking out what whatever indigenous or folk musics of that place might be, just for edification. I just want to know. I've been on the African continent, but not enough, only once, so I want to go back there. Been all over Europe, and I feel like it's only made me more aware of how much alike we all are as human beings. You know, if you're in Australia or Japan and there's a mother pushing her baby in a stroller and you see this baby smiling and mother talking, it's the same thing. You know, everybody, all of us human beings really want the same thing. You know, and so I think the fact that people have an appreciation for musics and from around the world have appreciation for jazz speaks to something about the inherent, I don't know, the way that it makes people feel. You know, people have come up with recording CDs or maybe LPs to sign, and you're like, wow, you have this record, you know, and you're in a remote part of Japan where they don't, you know, not even near Tokyo, some little village or something. So, and a lot of our great musicians, Louis Armstrong and Benny Goodman and Lionel Hampton and those early musicians had a chance to travel the world, and people heard this unique music that was coming out of America, you know, rooted in these African American musicians, but became a music embraced by the world. So it feels good to be a part of something like that, you know. It's the world's music now, you know, and it has, you can get a degree in it.
Yeah.
In major universities and whatnot, whereas most of the early great players didn't have any of that kind of university music program training. They got it on the job a lot of times, or self-taught very often. But I listen to a lot of different music. Sometimes, I never know what I might wake up in the morning and want to hear. I might put on Fats Waller, or I like stride piano.
Yeah.
Like that. It just that the rhythm of it has a certain feeling, you know. Or I might put on a Mahler symphony because it takes me different places, you know. Just be open to music and don't limit yourself, you know. That's kind of my philosophy, and I can tell stories, a lot of stories. I remember the first time Oscar Peterson reached out to me to play with him. I'm on maybe, I don't know how many records, 5, I think, 4 or 5. But when I first got a call about recording with him, his management reached out and they said, when I answered the phone, I said, hello, is this Lewis? Yes. We're calling on behalf of Oscar Peterson. He'd like for you to come to Canada to make a recording with him. So they let me know the dates and everything. And when I hung up, well, before I hung up, I said to them, I had a thought, because they said they only asked for Lewis. They didn't say my last name. So there was another Lewis who used to play with Oscar, Lewis Hayes, who played with Oscar Peterson for many years. And before we hung up, I said, are you sure you're on the right Lewis? I don't want to get too excited and happy. They're not trying to reach me.
Yeah.
And they said, we think so. You know, so I hung up. 10 minutes later, the phone rings. Hello, is this Lewis Nash? Yes, speaking. They called the right guy. It was Oscar Peterson.
Oh, wow.
They called the right guy. I'm very familiar with your work. So that taught me something. I didn't even know that he knew me from the Man in the Moon. But older musicians are always kind of keeping their ears open to who's coming along, who might be able to, enhance the music. So when he said, "I'm very familiar with your work," that just floored me.
Wow.
Because I'm thinking I'm just getting from day to day, trying to improve and get better, and someone like that is listening to me. So to always know that you're, you know, if you're playing gigs, you never know who's in the audience within a year or two what you're doing, and it might be that one opportunity to take another step in your, you know, in your life of evolving as a musician. I had a chance to work for 10 years in a trio with a pianist named Tommy Flanagan. And Tommy Flanagan was another Detroit musician, and he played with Coleman Hawkins, the great tenor saxophonist, and he also was Ella Fitzgerald's accompanist for many years. So even though I didn't get to play with Ella, I feel like somehow vicariously through him, I got some of that feeling of what it's like to be on stage with her, because his touch was so beautiful. They called him the jazz poet. That was his nickname, poet of the jazz piano, Tommy Flanagan. Very, very beautiful touch. He was a huge influence on Kenny Barron, who's probably the elder statesman of pianists nowadays, at that level. And so 10 years of traveling the road with him, I really learned a lot. Through traveling with him, playing with him, I had a chance to play with other musicians who were either guests on his recordings or guests on concerts with him. You know the name Benny Carter? Benny Carter was playing he's one of the early jazz composers and arrangers. He played trumpet as well as alto saxophone, I knew that. But, you know, he was playing since the 20s. You know, so when I would encounter these people, I'm like, man, you know, I would just feel so awestruck. And I would be, Mr. Carter, oh, call me Benny. I couldn't. I would say something else, Mr. Carter, oh, no, call me Benny. Out of respect. But I played a recording session one time with Benny Carter where Hank Jones was the pianist. I think Hank was 77 at the time, and Benny was 87 or something like that. And I was in my 30s, I think, and Christian McBride was barely 20, playing bass on that. So a multi-generational recording session. That's one of the beauties of this music also. I know I kind of touched on it earlier, but in rock and pop, you don't see that multi-generational, cross-generational thing happen all the time, you know? It's a beautiful thing about jazz, you know? You can be on stage with someone, sharing musical moments, interacting, playing with someone who's been playing the instrument longer than you've been alive, maybe, you know, or someone who's like your grandfather, or your father, or your mother, or grandmother, and you're able to be on stage and make music with them, or in the recording studio make music with them. So I value that part of this journey of mine also.
Have you played with Miles or Bill Evans? Miles Davis?
I've never got a chance to play with Miles, but I met Miles in, I think it was it Nice? One of those early festivals, somewhere in France. Betty Carter, yeah, it was Nice. Betty Carter, who this vocalist I was working with at the time, she introduced me to him. Come here, kid. She called me kid for 4 years. When I joined her, I was 21. Come here, kid. I want you to meet someone. And I started walking over, and I'm like, oh, it's Miles Davis. So I go and he reaches his hand out. Sound good. That's what he said. So I got a chance to meet him.
That's too cool.
Pretty much the most of my interaction with him. And I took it. Anybody know the name Bobby Short? Anyone know that name? He's a pianist. He's passed on now. He's kind of a cabaret pianist. Just play around New York. I took, at that same festival, I took a Polaroid picture of Miles smiling and talking with Bobby Short. So I still have that Polaroid, you know, with me. I didn't get to play with Miles, but Dizzy I got to play with a lot. I got to hang out with Dizzy. And Dizzy liked this cymbal right here. Yeah. So I would, you know, I remember on the gig, or at the sound check for this gig at the Blue Note in New York. And, you know, usually with the soloists playing, I'll play this cymbal for a while, and I'll play this one for a while, just for a change of color. You guys know about that.
Yeah.
And so when I was doing that, and Dizzy was standing right here, and he turned and he said, that one. So I just stayed on
Yeah.
the whole
That's
time.
awesome.
Yeah.
Did he always have the funny trumpet that goes up?
Yes, that's right. Do you know the story behind how that happened?
Did he like sit on it?
Yeah, someone, it fell on it, or someone stepped, it got accidentally bent. And so he liked the way the sound was now going up. And so he had it made like that after that. And even a young Lee Morgan, you can see pictures of him with one of those. And I remember, I think there's a picture of an entire trumpet section with those dizzy. Yeah. And, you know, I remember Dizzy he'd be on Sesame Street with Kermit the Frog or some of those little Jim Henson Muppets doing his, you know, making his cheeks go out and playing and dancing and everything. He was a real true ambassador of the music, but really respected at a high level. You know, he could be funny, but he was extremely knowledgeable and could talk about music chords and stuff with anyone. And I would witness people like Jimmy Heath and Benny Golson and Slide Hampton and people like that who I held in high esteem. If Dizzy came in the room, it was like they became little boys again. It's like, oh, Dizzy's here, and they would just like gather around. It was really interesting to see that. You know. So, any other general questions? Anything?
I'm curious about New York City being the I don't know, the heartbeat and
Right,
jazz
yeah.
kind of thing, you know, the famous clubs. But
Right.
so when you spent time moving back really to the Phoenix area, was there a huge like a vibe difference that you felt right away, or did you?
Just from being in New York?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a certain thing that only New York has, energetically speaking. And it's like a magnet, really, for creativity and motion, energetic. You got to get things done. You know, it's like that, the energy in New York. And I think that's why still young musicians are drawn to go there even now. You know, if you want to test yourself and see where you stand in the mix of other musicians, you got to at some point go there. I don't think it's necessary to spend years and years living there. If you want to, if it feels good, if it works out, great. But you at least have to go and experience it and see what it feels like to be there in that environment and feel that energy, because there's nothing else like it. You know? Some of the clubs still exist. Clubs come and go, as you know. The Birdland that's in New York now is not the Birdland where Charlie Parker played. It's just, you know, the person who owns it he owns the name, that he got it legally, but it's not the same building or the same place. But it does represent, through the name, a history of jazz music being played there, so that is still important. Village Vanguard is still there. That club has been there since the 30s, I think. And other than that, I mean, most of the clubs are gone. You know, the clubs you hear about, the big bands playing, the Savoy, where Chick Webb played. You know, the home of Happy Feet, dancing. You know, that's dance club. Ella Fitzgerald was discovered with Chick Webb there when she was a teenager. So the Apollo Theater is still there. There were a lot of other clubs that have gone by the wayside since then. But if you read jazz biographies and jazz histories, those clubs almost come to life when the author talks about them. You can just feel what's going on there. I had having a chance to interact with many musicians. Another name that comes to mind is the trumpet player Art Farmer. I don't know if you know that name at all, but he actually spent some time in Phoenix. He had a twin brother named Addison, Art and Addison Farmer. If you look there's a recording of Benny Golson and the Jazz Tet, the group was called, and that featured Art Farmer and Addison Farmer on one of these album covers. You can see it. The trumpet player in the front is Art, and in the back looks just like him, holding the bass.
Yeah.
My brother Addison. And Art Farmer was a great trumpet player, and when I finally got a chance to play with him, and he found out that I was from Phoenix, where he was in high school there, he and his brother. And it was a segregated high school in Phoenix. It was called, this would have been probably in the early 40s. Phoenix Union Colored High School, it was called. He would tell me stories about going there, and then he and his brother eventually got to Los Angeles, where they were part of the LA jazz scene with a very young Dexter Gordon and a tenor saxophone player named Wardell Gray, who was a part of that early Los Angeles jazz scene. But I'm really happy that I got to know Art and to tour with him, record with him, and we had a special connection because we had Phoenix in common. You know? Something else? Let me think about a few little drum set principles before we run out of time.
I have a question about the way you like crash the cymbals. You sort of leave the stick in there.
Yeah. That's something that I came up. I mean, I never saw anyone do it, but I would be in situations where I didn't want that harsh. I didn't want a harsh crash sound, and I didn't want it to last too long. I wanted it to disappear quickly.
Yeah.
And so I found that if you crash, like prepare your ears. Here, you know. That's kind of a regular crash, right? But sometimes when I would crash, I would leave the stick into the cymbal like that and kind of come off it like that, and it would mute. The wood mutes it. So. I'm glad you noticed that, because it's something that I stumbled upon myself. I never saw anyone else doing it, but it was something that I wanted to. I kind of kept doing it because I liked the effect of it. Let's raise this just a bit. So another thing. Oh, I was going to also say about the rivets. Now there's only 2 in here. I usually have 4 in here, but I like to create. I was mentioning John Lewis because on that recording I did with him, that I mentioned his last recording. Sometimes, like on a ballad, let's say Body and Soul, right? Everybody's kind of familiar with that song. What I would do sometimes is just roll on the cymbals without any brush sound. And it gives this nice palette sound. And then I would do that for a while, rolling on those, and then come out of that, I'd give a little crescendo. And then that would die out, and then you'd hear this. And a lot of times when I play roughly, I try to do it, I think of an ocean wave sound. So I try to do it in a way that you don't hear you can play it where you hear I'm going to come out here with the snare drum so you can see it. So maybe, usually you'll hear the change of direction and direction, but I like to not hear it. Meanwhile, the time is your 2, 3, 4, and if you don't watch, like your arms cannot be in time. You want to hear like that. You can do it with one brush. Meanwhile, if my foot is tapping time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, or you can do it like this. You're going to hear a little bit of the change of direction as well with it. So when you have both of them, it kind of moves it. One, two, three, four. So I found ways to make it sound just even like this instead of You don't wanna hear that all the time, but sometimes you do. And counterclockwise, I play sometimes. Playing brushes is almost like doing Tai Chi to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So just, I would practice a lot of times circles of various circumferences, like small circles. You just get muscle memory, getting your arms and hands used to playing, going this motion and this direction, and I would change direction, large circles, down to small, and I would do the same thing with the left hand. It doesn't even have to be in time, it's just a matter of getting your hand, and when I go counterclockwise, my hand is not like this, like you would normally play it. It's palm down, like this. So from putting pressure with the wire, you get different sound. Or you know the weiro, you can get
Yeah.
a snare weiro sound. And then I sometimes do what I call the reverse or the backward weiro, which is the weiro. The one I just did was it's kind of like emulating the Brazilian shaker, the afuja, the cabasa, the is that the name? Yeah, the cabasa, the thing that has the metal
Yeah.
wrapped around the can, like, you can get that sound. I'm really emulating that when I do that. But just, you know, with brushes, do the same things, you like practice all your rudiments with brushes, the same way you do with sticks. Practice all those so that you have this, but the thing that the brushes can do that the sticks can't, of course, is sweep. I remember I did a presentation for an elementary school kid, maybe it's 3rd or 4th grade, and I said, does anyone know what these are? And a little boy was like, yes, brooms! And that's basically, if you, whisk brooms are part of the, you know, in the early days when there weren't manufacturing brushes, they did use whisk brooms on the drums to make that sound. And fly swatters also, to get certain sounds. All right, let me see where we're at time-wise. Any other questions before we call it a night?
I saw that you were feathering.
Oh, yeah.
Is that like?
I pretty much do most of the time.
Okay.
So if you're not sure what he's talking about with feathering, we want to play the bass drum as light as a feather. That's where feathering comes from. So you don't want it to be when you're playing time. In the swing era, they did play the bass drum more heavily so dancers to feel it. So as the music evolved and more modern players lightened up on the bass drum and would play more like where you couldn't really hear it. Like that feather. I probably do it 90% of the time. Even at faster tempo. and even ballads, slow ballads. If I'm, it's a grounding kind of thing. The bass is playing, you won't hear it, but
Yeah.
the band will feel it, but the audience won't hear it.
Yeah.
So that's what that's about. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap up. I'm really happy that everybody decided to come spend some time with me this evening and just allow me to talk a little bit about this instrument, which I love, and I think it has the capability and capacity to make really beautiful sounds. It's not a noisemaker in the right hands. Beauty can come out of this instrument in the right hands. So I continue to explore. As I mentioned, I'm mid-60s now. I can remember when I was always the youngest person in the band. Now that's not true anymore. But I don't know, when I'm behind this instrument, I feel just as youthful. I feel like I feel the same kind of feelings when I was a teenager and I was playing, and it just, the same joy and the same kind of feelings still happen. So that's important to me as well. And probably, I understand why, people often will ask about elderly jazz musicians. Sometimes they may be in a walker, or may have breathing apparatus on stage. Oh, why do they continue to be on stage, and how come they don't just stay at home? It's because of that joy. Because if they didn't do this, that would be it.
Yeah.
So I understand. The older I get, the more I understand why people who maybe don't have the technique they used to have, but they still want to express, and still makes them feel, that joy and relevance that they can still play with other musicians. So I hope I do this until my last breath. And I mean, some musicians have. I know there's one drummer who died on stage. His name was Eddie Moore, really good drummer. Who else was it? Can't remember now. But there are instances of people, on stage. That's it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I don't know if I want that to happen. So yeah, I love what I do. I have two daughters who are 35 and 31 now, and they've witnessed me do this their whole lives, and they're both in the entertainment and artistic world. They're vocalists and dancers. My youngest daughter, as a matter of fact, right now is on tour. She was on Broadway for a while, for a couple of years. She was in Harry Potter on Broadway. And now she's touring with the traveling road company of The Lion King.
Oh, sweet.
So she's living her dream. She got her degree in theater. My oldest daughter she sings, and she's doing stuff with groups in New York. And their mother's a dancer and singer as well, so they got it honestly from both of us. But it's a world where you can experience a lot of things with a lot of people and learn a lot about yourself in the process of doing this. But also it allowed me to see the world, not at my own expense. Several times over. I've been to Japan over 100 times. And all over Europe many times as well. So when I go to Italy, I have friends there. When I go to France, I have friends there, like that. And it just enriches your life. It's enriched my life a lot, just being able to do that and have those friendships and connections, even outside of the music, although the music was the vehicle that created them. But it's something I wouldn't trade for anything else, just to be able to travel the world, meet people, play music, experience the food and culture of worldwide and all that. It's something you can't buy, and I try to express that to young people too, that you never know what opportunities is around the corner. That's why you continue to practice and put in the time, because just like the Oscar Peterson story, you don't know who's listening, and someone might be looking for someone at the very moment you're on stage doing something. Someone might come in, it could be a restaurant, and someone's going to eat who's a contractor or a band leader or something, and they say, wow, did you hear that drummer? He could work for our show, you know, or whatever it might be. So it's just, you know, whenever you're performing, don't take it lightly. Like I said at the very beginning, when I come behind here, it's like a minister getting ready to, you know, uplift everyone with their words of wisdom and spiritual knowledge. So I think music does the same thing. So thank you, everybody, so much.
Thank you.